Good Monday, everybody. Welcome to Charting with Dan. I'm Dan Murrell. Joining me, Lon Harris. Lon, thanks for joining me. Welcome
Always
back.
Always a pleasure.
Lon, this is one of those weekends. Sometimes you think that you know what the big story is going to be. Avengers, you know what the big story is going to be. This one is a weekend where there's one big story, which we're going to talk about a lot, but there's like 2 or 3 little micro stories inside the box office that I want to talk about. But we'll do them one at a time. Let's look at the top 5 box office for this weekend. This is one of those weekends where there was 2 big, wide new releases, Secret Life of Pets 2 and Dark Phoenix. I think perhaps 6 months ago, if you'd asked what was going to come out on top, people would probably say like, oh, well, Dark Phoenix, but that's a pretty competitive weekend. Well, again, that's why you play the game. Secret Life of Pets 2, number 1, lower than expected. Dark Phoenix, number 2, way lower than expected. So let's talk about the number 1 movie first and get that out of the way. And the Dark Phoenix is sucking in most of the media attention just because it had a $200 million budget. It's the lowest ever debut for an X-Men movie domestically.
And it's the last of this whole franchise run.
There's a storyline around it, and there has been for some time, so that's sucking most of the attention away. And I think that's probably to the benefit of Secret Life of Pets 2, because no one really is talking about the fact that while it opened number 1 at the box office, it opened to less than half of the $104 million that the original Secret Life of Pets movie did. When we did our predictions, I predicted Secret Life of Pets 2 up pretty high because the usual trajectory of a family film is you have an original one that people kind of know, like How to Train Your Dragon or Shrek or Toy Story, that is very popular. And then when you put the second one out, it shoots up like that.
Because in the intervening time, families have had a chance to catch up with the movie, and like kids have had a chance to get obsessed with it, where it's the one they want to put on every day. So like these kind of kids movies, they find their audience once they're on VOD and video.
Well, it turns out the audience wasn't too interested in a second Secret Life of Pets movie. First of all, the first one had a great marketing campaign.
Yes.
And the movie I felt was very by the book.
It's middle of I haven't seen the second one. The first one is very genial.
Yes.
It's an Illumination animated film.
Is.
It feels exactly like what they do.
The marketing didn't have the pop this time. I haven't seen this one yet. I haven't had a chance to see the Secret Life of Pets 2 yet.
The kids love Louis C.K. The kids were like not
Without
showing up
Louis
this time.
there, they really just were not going to show up to the box office. Yikes. So if Universal is looking to build a new Gru-type franchise, does not look like Secret Life of Pets 2 is going to be it. Here, though, is why it's the rare. I don't know if it was foresight on their part or if the creators behind the movie just said, "Hey, we don't need more than this." But here's the saving grace: is the one thing that this movie did for an animation sequel that usually does not happen is they did not balloon the budget up.
Right.
They did not go get every voice actor known to man. They got Harrison Ford.
Yeah, not bad.
But other than that, and replacing a couple people or one, they didn't go and get
It's Patton Oswalt.
It's Patton Oswalt this time.
Better.
I agree. I like Patton. They did not balloon the budget. It was an $80 million budget reportedly compared to the original $75 million budget. The original made $875 million worldwide. It made 10 times its budget. So the smart thing about this is that Universal stayed budget conscious on this movie. It did not have a massive budget. It'll be easier for it to make that money back. We'll see how it does worldwide. But the big story being, this was one of those movies that I think some people were pointing to, like, well, the original did so great, like this one's going to do gangbusters. Nope.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that there are ramifications for Universal way beyond just this one movie. With everybody having franchise mania, a new animated franchise that you could build streaming shows off of, that you could make more sequels. There's a million opportunities that it opens up, and now that audiences are losing interest in these pets, it's a triple problem for Universal.
I was convinced that Snowball, Kevin Hart's Snowball, was going to be the next spin-off character coming out of this thing.
And that's the kind of stuff, like, you think about the Shrek series, what they were able to do with Puss in Boots becomes his own franchise, and like you can really start to stretch out. And like DreamWorks has all of their Netflix shows carrying on all of their films. You know, there's a Boss Baby series and Train Your Dragon shows. Those opportunities dwindle when the movies just don't come out and get audiences excited.
Yeah, we would talk a lot more about this. However, there is a bigger elephant in the room, and that is Dark Phoenix. The worst case scenario of worst case scenarios if you're Fox, Disney. Really, I mean, this is a legacy project that was developed while Fox was not owned by Disney, but still, yikes.
Yeah.
The second yikes of the show, and well deserved, because $200 million budget. Last week we talked about Godzilla. We talked about like, oh, it was lower than expectation. It was a high budgeted movie. We're gonna have to see what it does. What does it do worldwide? And there's this mitigating factor and that mitigating factor, but it's still not a disappointing opening. And what does it mean for the future? This is just a disaster.
Yeah.
This is an outright disaster. $32 million domestically. It's the lowest domestic opening of any film in the X-Men franchise, and I don't mean movies just branded X-Men.
Right.
I mean
Like,
the Wolverine, X-Men Origins, Deadpool, Logan. The lowest domestic opening of any film in the X-Men franchise by over $20 million. It's a $20 million gap between Dark Phoenix and the next highest budget movie up, which was the Wolverine, and that's unadjusted for inflation. If you adjust those numbers for inflation, that gap gets any wider. This movie fell off a cliff. This franchise fell off a cliff. There are reports that came out today and over the weekend saying that the film is poised to lose $100 million or more.
Wow.
We're going to follow up later on what happened, how this happened, but Lon, I mean, it's disastrous.
Yeah, no, it's not good. I mean, especially as the sort of farewell to this franchise, it just leaves a sour taste in everyone's mouth. What a disappointment. I mean, I have my own theories, but I think it's almost, and we'll talk more about this, of course, it's kind of a perfect storm of bad things. Like almost everything that can happen to negatively impact a film's box office happened in this case to Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, and there was a lot of talk about, because it's the finale and Avengers Endgame is leaning so hard on the finale aspect, like, is that going to drive people to the theaters? And ultimately, it didn't. Like I said, there are a couple of factors that I think weighed into that. We'll talk about those in a second. But let's round out the top 5 super quick. Aladdin holding strong in third. Godzilla dropped to fourth, and not by a little bit. Aladdin holding strong in third place. It's gonna pass Maleficent this week to become the 4th most successful Disney live action remake. We're gonna put a pin in Aladdin because we're gonna talk about him when we go to worldwide. But Godzilla, another movie. Huge beneficiary of Dark Phoenix sucking up all of the ink, because that's another story that people would be talking about, the fact that Godzilla dropped almost 68% in week 2. When we talk about a bad drop, Lon, we always say
70.
70 is like the red line number of just like, if you fall 70% or more, that is,
you're on your way out.
You're on your way out. Godzilla 68%. We talked about the fact that this might be what was happening last week, judging by the fact that Aladdin overtook Godzilla on Saturday and Sunday of Godzilla's opening weekend.
Yeah.
And looks like audience interest in Godzilla domestically was peaked on opening night.
Yeah.
68%, if you are that movie and you open below expectation, that is a very bad number.
I mean, if you're looking at social media, and obviously this is anecdotal, but Aladdin is managing to build buzz. Like, it opened on sort of an off foot. People weren't sure what to make of it. And then ever since, it's had a lot of like, actually, this is a lot better than I thought. And my kids loved it. We went back for a second time. And Godzilla is exactly the opposite. It's that people were kind of interested. It was buzzy before it opened. And ever since, the talk has just been miserable.
Yeah, Aladdin and John Wick 3 are the 2 movies so far this summer that have surprised me the most, in the sense that I never expected John Wick 3. Part of it is because there have been underperformances on some of the huge movies, but I never expected John Wick 3 to be as high up as it is at this point in the summer. And Aladdin, it was just such a question mark, and it is just rock solid and holding strong, and it's fourth, fifth week of release. It really surprises me how well it's done, because I foresaw potentially Aladdin being one of those Disney disasters that we've seen, like Wrinkle in Time or like the Nutcracker, where it's just like, or even Dumbo, where it's just like, that was a miscalculation. Like, nobody wanted this. No, everyone wants this.
4 or 5 days before Aladdin opened, they released that Prince Ali clip with Will Smith. And I haven't seen the full film Aladdin, but that clip did not strike me as being very good.
That was the worst part of the number. And literally a second after that clip ends,
it gets good.
It gets so much better. Like, I was watching the movie, and that part of the song came on, and I was just like, and then it kept going, and literally like 5 seconds later, it's so much better. I'm like, why would you pick the worst part of that song?
And based on that clip, I was like, ooh boy, this may be another Dumbo. This does not look great. But apparently, that's just a bad selection of a clip, and people are loving the film.
The marketing on that movie was so weird, because I mean, I guess it's nice. Maybe that was their strategy, is we're going to intentionally put out the most underwhelming parts of the movie because almost everything that was actually in the movie was so much better than anything they
Definitely
released
part of their marketing with all these live action films is like to show the side by side of like, look how close the live action version is to the animated, which is baffling to me. People love that, I guess.
Disney usually does well in its marketing, but their Aladdin marketing has been very weird. Conversely, Aladdin is doing great. I don't know how the world works anymore, and nobody does. And if they say they do, they're lying. Okay, rounding up the top 5, Rocket Man dropped less than 50% to cross the $50 million mark. It's hanging in the top 5. Again, that's a $40 million budget, so not as high stakes as a lot of the other movies.
If you look at these 5, it's a victory of counter programming. I think the boomers are all going to Rocket. This is like younger people are seeing the top 4, and then everybody like 50 and up is going to Rocket.
It almost feels like Aladdin and Dark Phoenix are like those cards where you join them together and they're just one picture because
the color palette is very similar.
Blue and orangish red appear to be the only palette in the Disney marketing.
Yeah, that's their toolbox.
Yeah, that's their toolbox. Is it's either orangey red or blue. Those are the two. Whatever.
Grabs the eye.
Let's look at the top per theater average. Late Night was the #1 movie per theater. That is obviously starring Emma Thompson and Mindy Kaling. Mindy Kaling plays a writer who's brought into in an Emma Thompson show. She's a tenured late night host. Many think she's past her prime. It is a comedy from Amazon, and usually, a lot of times when I show you the per theater winner, we talk about the fact that like, oh, it's cool that look for it on streaming, or maybe it'll expand. Amazon is actually taking their strategy that they did with The Big Sick a couple years ago and applying it to this film, where Late Night opened in 4 theaters. Got the per theater average, but it is actually going wide. It's opening in 1,500 theaters this weekend. Yeah. So if you're interested in Late Night, or if you haven't heard of it, or if you want to learn more about it, this is one of those few movies that wins the per theater thing that's in limited release that you can actually conceivably and realistically find near you, hopefully very soon.
Yeah, it was, very similar to Big Sick. It was a Sundance comedy hit. They picked it up, and they are trying as best they can to run the identical playbook. Yeah. And I mean, in the same way, they're hoping that it gets award consideration later in the year. It's supposed to be great. I have not seen it.
Oddly, this means that Emma Thompson this weekend will be competing against herself. Yeah. Because she's in Men in Black International, also in Late Night.
I had forgotten until we did the Honest trailer that she's in Men in Black 3. She's a carryover character. She's the only one.
She's the Judi Dench.
Yeah.
She's the M of the Men in Black franchise.
Good for them.
But she's O.
Right.
I never thought about that. M and James, they both
must
have
done that on purpose.
Letter names. So Late Night, if you're interested in seeing it, one of the few ones that you can actually conceivably go see this weekend because they're opening it wide. Let's zoom out from North America to the world, Lon, where Dark Phoenix is, again, a disappointing #1.
Yeah, but it's #1 at least.
But it's #1. It was a day-and-date movie pretty much everywhere, a couple straggler markets. Much like in the U.S., it opened under projections, $139 million worldwide. Its biggest market in the entire world, including North America, was China. It opened to about $43 million in China. That was the #1 global market for Dark Phoenix. But even that was a long weekend in China. Well, we'll talk about the release date drama, but let's briefly go all the way back to when the original date for Dark Phoenix was pushed from February to June.
Right.
The company line that was fed was that they had moved it so that potentially Dark Phoenix could benefit from a holiday weekend in China in June. It did not. I mean, it was the #1 global market, but it had a big first day, and then over the course of the weekend, it fell off.
They were definitely hoping for bigger numbers.
Maybe, I don't know if that was much of a big strategic move, and we'll talk about whether that was actually the reason in a minute. But $200 million budget, under $140 million worldwide opening. There's just really not much good news here.
There's not much good news.
If you're Dark Phoenix.
The one ray of sunshine is it sort of doesn't matter. I mean, obviously it's a huge write down for the company, but there wasn't going to be any more continuation to this version of the franchise anyway.
That's true. I think it's more just if you're a fan of the franchise, obviously if you are an actor involved in it, there's someone like a James McAvoy or Fassbender, even Sophie Turner who's done 2 of them now. You've invested some time into this.
It would have been nice for Nicholas Hoult to get a victory lap, of course.
Yeah, to get a nice beast victory lap.
Sure. But in the grand scheme, whereas Godzilla, King of the Monsters has massive punishing implications for all of their plans down the road, this was already going to be the wrap-up X-Men.
It's kind of like when they say you're playing with house money, except the bad version where you put everything on red and you lose it.
Yeah, it's like I said, for the company, it's a punishment. It's a write-down. But for X-Men fans, well, this was inevitable anyway. This version was going to end, and Kevin Feige will get his hands on it and do something else.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. They say it'll be a few years. Maybe that's for the best.
Yes.
Aladdin, we talked about it a little bit domestically. Let's talk about it worldwide. It was the number 2 movie worldwide. It was the number 2 movie worldwide last weekend. As a matter of fact, it dropped less than $30 million from last weekend to this weekend worldwide. So that is another story, is Aladdin doing well, not just domestically, but over $500 million worldwide, holding well. I didn't see it coming.
Thank goodness Disney
to this degree. I really did
pull out a win.
I'm glad that they could really make a mess out of what has been just a horrible summer for them. Secret Life of Pets 2 opened at number 3, $62 million, just edging out Godzilla King of the Monsters. That falls from number 1 to much like in the U.S. It falls from number 1 to number 4 with $60 million, and then Rocket Man making a $26 million worldwide. But yeah, Godzilla.
It's tough, man, because Godzilla, you would think like, okay, maybe North American audiences they don't go way back with King Ghidorah and Rodan. So, maybe they weren't hyped for this movie, but that means that even the Asian audiences,
that's a big drop off.
Kaijus are their bread and butter aren't showing up for this.
That's a big drop off. Yeah. This is a weird. This kind of reminds me of summer 2016. It was the first year that I did Summer Movie Report, where week after week there were some breakout hits, but it almost seemed like we were talking about the disappointments that were happening week after week instead of the hits.
And I mean, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll talk about Men in Black towards the end, but
we'll see.
I don't know.
Well, the word has not been left. Spider-Man seems like a pretty safe bet.
I feel like Spidey's going to do well.
Disney needs another.
Again, Disney.
Lon, Dark Phoenix. Let's do a little dissection. Let's do a little postmortem. What happened?
I think there's a lot to. I'm a big believer in self-fulfilling prophecies. That narratives take hold on the internet, among fans, in the press, and then these narratives become the story. They're self-fulfilling. And I think that's been happening with X-Men. Apocalypse was a huge disappointment.
Well, let's start with that. Let's start with Apocalypse, because I think the number one thing, you have to go back 3 years. If you want to see what happened to Dark Phoenix, sometimes you have to rewind. It's like a Quentin Tarantino movie. Let's go back. Let's go back to Apocalypse.
The groovy year of 2016.
The groovy year of 2016. It does seem like a different lifetime in many ways. But the summer of 2016 was when Apocalypse came out. It was a sequel. It was a sequel to Days of Future Past. A lot of people were riding high on Days of Future Past, but I think it had some elements that perhaps point to why Dark Phoenix didn't do so great. Number one, critically, not a hit. We'll talk about reviews a little bit more in a second. But I think for the hardcore fans, Days of Future Past is a big X-Men storyline that largely, I would just say most X-Men fans were happy with the execution of Days of Future Past.
Yeah, I think it's sort of universally now, not universally, but like largely considered among the top 2 or 3 of the whole franchise.
Yes. Then you have Apocalypse. Apocalypse, a huge character in the X-Men mythology. Age of Apocalypse, one of the big X-Men storylines. This is an untapped top 2 or 3 X-Men villains.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're a hardcore fan, many of them not a fan of the execution of that particular character.
Right.
In that movie. Taking from that the fact that you have the removal again of the original cast. X-Men First Class did okay. Didn't do great. You bring in the original cast, boom. Days of Future Past pops, sold it around Wolverine. You take the cast out again, Apocalypse, I think it would be, to many people, they botched that film. So I think part of the problem with what happened with Dark Phoenix is that going back to the last movie, you have a storyline, you have a major character, and you have a new cast, at least as far as executing their own big storyline. It didn't go well. So what did he do? Higher budget, a bigger budget for this movie, another big storyline with the same cast, with the same creatives that had already botched the same storyline earlier. I think part of what happened to Dark Phoenix may be that a lot of fans were off-put by what happened with Apocalypse, were off-put with what already happened with The Last Stand with Phoenix. They were just like, I give up.
Right. And I think you add that into the idea that this is the last one. I mean, one thing that audiences have become really reliable about in the last few years is they like these ongoing shared universes where the story keeps going, and you have to see this one in order to get the next one.
Yeah.
And I think that this doesn't have that for the first time ever in this franchise. There isn't another movie in this series coming, and so people are like, it doesn't matter if I miss this one.
Yeah.
Or at least wait till VOD.
And I also think that you don't peg everything on what franchises have done in the past, because a lot of times a franchise can reinvent itself. That's certainly what the X-Men tried to do.
Many times.
But a lot of times I think you do have to look at what has happened historically with the franchise and why people might be loath to repeat the same mistakes. So this is another fancy new chart, but this is the reviews for X-Men films, and this is across the entire spectrum of the X-Men universe, versus their opening weekends. So let's look at the reviews versus the opening weekends. These are adjusted for inflation, the opening weekend. So I trying to get them all. But I really don't think you can overestimate the effect on the fan base, on a large portion of the fan base, that X-Men The Last Stand, and I know it goes back a while, but fans have very long memories, but that X-Men The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine had. The bottom line is the tomato meter. How well the movie was reviewed. The top line there, mostly the lighter colored line, is the opening weekend. So as you can see, X-Men, fairly good reviews, had a debut when you adjust for inflation just under $100 million. X2, even better reviews, even higher release. But look at the gap there between X-Men The Last Stand, the highest grossing opening, the highest debut for an X-Men movie ever. It had some of the worst reviews in the franchise, but one of the best openings in the franchise.
Yeah.
Then the next film, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Again, even worse reviews, but look at the opening. Again, over $100 million. So again,
it did better than the original X-Men.
Twice in a row, the fan base for X-Men ignored bad reviews and turned out in pretty large numbers to go see films in this franchise. But if you look at what happened after that, look at X-Men First Class. Much better, way better reviews than X-Men Origins Wolverine. A substantially smaller amount of people came up to see it. Then the next movie featuring Wolverine, again, substantially better reviews. Almost a flat turnout from X-Men First Class. Then you have Days of Future Past. Reviews got better. The debut got better. Coming off of Days of Future Past, you have Deadpool. That's a good turnout. Then Apocalypse. Look what happens. I mean, you have an upward trend. Bad reviews, low turnout, low opening weekend. Logan, you spike back up. Good reviews, good turnout. Deadpool 2, good weekend, good reviews. But then look at Dark Phoenix. Bad reviews, bad turnout. So I do think you do have to point to the fact that it's almost learned behavior in the minds of a lot of fans, which is that they learned from a few of the early entries in this series that maybe this isn't a franchise where the critics are being a little too harsh. Or maybe it's not one where you should completely discount the reviews, because two of the highest openings in the franchise were for two of the lowest critically rated films in the franchise. And it's very possible that people may have decided with this movie they might put a little more stock in the reviews than they might for other films.
Yeah, I mean, it's a franchise that lacks consistency. A lot of the times movies become critic-proof because they're part of franchises and you sort of know what you're going to get. Like if you were a Harry Potter fan when Harry Potter 6 came out, maybe you don't. You know what you're going to get. These movies are a relatively level set of, they're consistent. This is not a franchise that ever really managed consistency. Wild swings in quality, movie to movie. And so I think I think you're exactly right. I think it teaches people, maybe check out what people are saying before you go see an X-Men movie, because you can't count on each one being as good as the last one.
Right. It's almost like fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you again. But fool me 3 times, no.
Right. I even remember like in the 90s when like slasher franchises were still riding high, those movies were entirely critic-proof.
And the picture of critic-proof.
Because if you like Jason and you've liked the last 7 Friday the 13th, you're probably going to like the 8th one.
Like
they're not maybe they'll send him to space, but they're probably not messing with it that much. That was 10, but
yes, still
for the record.
The point taken.
Right, yeah, but it's like even if it's low level consistency, there's consistency. And X-Men, I don't think they ever got there.
I don't think they did either. So you have a little bit of backup that reviews and that may affect the opening weekends. The fact that the highest debuts, and some of that have been some of the worst reviews. Maybe Onyx has learned with that. You have the fact that Apocalypse wasn't well received by everybody. Then there's the inconsistency with Dark Phoenix, and let's go back to when the big splashy trailer for Dark Phoenix was released several months ago, and you had this screen at the end of it, February 14th.
Valentine's Day.
Bummer. The next day, literally, they changed the release date.
Right, that's right, yeah.
Literally, the next day, they changed the release date of the film. So any momentum that the movie might have had, you've primed the pump. And then you immediately go like, oh, no, wait, hang on. It made the studio look like they didn't know what they were doing. It made the studio look like there was no plan, and I think it cast a pall even further for people that may have already been suspicious, but have already said, like, I'm still going to give them a chance. It still looks like they don't know what they're doing, because this is on top of the fact that they've done reshoots a year after the movie wrapped. The movie wrapped in October, I believe, 2017. They did reshoots almost a year later to go back and fix more stuff. Now, the stigma's off those a little bit, just because Marvel does them so often, and I think a lot of people are like, yeah, okay, reshoots are fine. But you add that, you take that with the date change, the late in the game date change, after a trailer comes out, already saying the day before that it's coming out 4 months earlier than it actually does.
I mean, we haven't even
helps.
added in New Mutants, a separate movie, but also going through crazy upheavals in the press during this same time, and it bleeds into each other. It just seems like Fox doesn't know what to do with the X-Men.
Yes. And so one other factor that came in, and these were reports that came in today, unnamed insiders, you should always take it with a grain of salt. As is so often the case, failure is an orphan.
Yes.
So I'm sure that there are interested parties that want to cast the blame for this on whomever might be around. But this was a potential wrinkle. The Hollywood Reporter did an article that actually came out this morning and analyzing what went wrong, what happened. They talked about the reshoots, the fact that you had to change the dates and the stigma that goes with that. But there is another wrinkle, which is the possibility that Fox's long-lasting relationship with James Cameron may have also played a role in what happened. According to the Hollywood Reporter story today, Alita: Battle Angel was originally scheduled to come out at the end of the year, at the end of 2018, and James Cameron reportedly, according to this article, was concerned that the film would get swallowed up by Bumblebee and Mary Poppins and Spider-Verse and everything else that was coming out, and some say demanded, some say asked, requested that the studio change the release date of the film to a better release date for that movie, that Fox acquiesced, that they moved Alita to February, that they moved Dark Phoenix to June over the objections of the creative team behind the movie, who didn't feel that Dark Phoenix had the scale to compete in the summer. That appears to be the truth. Now, is that true? Maybe, maybe not.
I mean, here's all I'll say. The thing that you have to remember is how important James Cameron is at Fox right now, because Fox, almost the only ongoing Fox project that is totally secure in the Disney era, is the Avatar series.
Yes.
They need him. They can't upset James Cameron. So he wouldn't really even need to demand. He could just ask.
I'm really concerned about this.
And if James Cameron, if you are a high-ranking Fox executive and James Cameron is asking you for something, that means he's telling you.
Now, there were other things that were brought up in that article, and again, it's tough to really gauge what is the truth of this, especially when it's somebody that's an unnamed source, but that said that there was also a misperception inside the studio that Apocalypse was an isolated thing, that perhaps the studio just got this one wrong, but that the fan base was still there and would be ready, and that in retrospect that was bad thinking. I think, even more so than James Cameron, one factor in this would just be you could just blanket term it to internal issues, in the sense that sometimes you just get it wrong, or sometimes things happen that you just can't control. It's what you were saying. This was almost a perfect storm for this movie, in that it encountered just about every difficulty, intentional, unintentional, avoidable, unavoidable, that you could possibly imagine with the movie. And when you see something underperform on this scale, you almost have to dig down, because there have to be reasons more than just, we slightly underestimated audience.
Yeah, no, this isn't a slight. There's one more factor we haven't even talked about. It's a guy by the name of Bryan Singer. When you have a franchise like this, there's often someone sort of steering the ship long term, and he's not around doing that anymore. So James Cameron,
depending on whom you ask, he was never around doing that to begin with.
Right.
I mean, I was reading other reports saying that Simon Kinberg was first getting director's credit on this movie, but that Simon Kinberg was one of the people on multiple Singer films in the past who would step in when he would just disappear.
Right. And I think
Which is kind of shocking. How can you do that repeatedly and still keep working?
I don't know. But
if I just disappeared randomly from here, like on multiple occasions,
it would be charting with Spencer and Lon.
Yeah, and
in a few weeks.
like if I just was like, okay, I'll be there in a second for charting, and then I just like left the building and no one knew where I went. I think there's only I'm saying that there should be a limit on how many times you can do that.
Yeah, and I mean, we were just talking about, like, Cameron being this guy in Alita's corner who can make those phone calls and who could say, here's what we need, here's what I think we should do. Mm-hmm. This franchise, it feels rudderless a lot of ways. It doesn't feel like there was anybody with the long-term vision who was like, this is what we should do next, this is how we should do it. And I think it's become very chaotic, maybe as partly a consequence of that.
Well, it's been a 19-year-long journey, Lon.
Yes,
it's certainly been. It takes me back to my days in high school watching the trailers for this film. The summer of 2000, actually being pretty pleased with the first film.
I had just graduated college.
Look at us now, analyzing it on the internet on a platform that didn't even exist at that time.
How far I've come.
I went from talking about X-Men in my dorm room to talking about X-Men here.
Beamed into many other people's dorm rooms.
Exactly. So this is a rather farty end to this franchise, but it is what it is.
Going out on Days of Future Past would have been.
It feels like if you could just rewind time, just make that, and then do Logan.
Right. But it was like the Star Trek Generations. Like, let's let them have their graceful exit.
Yeah.
And then we'll keep going with middling results.
Yeah. So that's the story of the X-Men. Let's take the cross out of the ground and turn it over to the side and walk away.
It's done.
It's probably for the best. All right, Lon, that's enough X-Men talk. Let's look at the charts for the year so far. There's been, as happens during the summer, you get some stuff moving. Not much movement on the domestic charts for this year. We've got Pokemon Detective Pikachu taking a one step down. John Wick Chapter 3. It's a pleasant surprise. Keanu's having a hell of a summer.
The Keanu-zance, we're in the midst of it.
I mean, I love Keanu Reeves, but even I did not see the unbridled Keanu-zance that's happening right now coming.
Did I really, like, looking on social media this week, it's like people didn't realize before that Keanu Reeves is great. Keanu Reeves has been great for decades.
Yes.
Did you guys not see Speed?
I think it's just it's the timing, it's the Toy Story voice.
The wig,
it's the Always Be My Maybe.
Game.
It's everything.
I mean, he's great in Always Be My Maybe. Like, I'm for it. I just like. Keanu's been terrific for forever, guys.
I'm glad that everyone is finally re-acknowledging how terrific Keanu
Sam
Reeves
Raimi's
is.
The Gift came out also in 2000, the same year as the original X-Men. An amazing Keanu Reeves performance. He's really terrific in that.
There you go. So 19 years removed, Keanu Reeves is getting his due for his performance in The Gift specifically.
I'm giving it up there. He's like
Lon.
a scary redneck in that. It's a real departure for him.
I'll have to check that out. Joel Edgerton. Not in a very long time.
Yes, it's not.
Joel Edgerton's The Gift is also a great movie.
A great movie. Jason Bateman.
Yes.
It's different The Gift. This one's Kate Blanchett, and she's psychic.
That's how you know you're getting old, Lon, is when people start making movies again that have the names of movies that you already like.
Yeah, and you're like, hey, but
wait a minute, I know that. No. 2019 worldwide, there's a little more movement on this chart. Pokemon Detective Pikachu, speaking of Alita Battle Angel, jumps over Alita for the number 6 spot. Aladdin jumps up to the number 4 spot of 2019 worldwide. And if you're a math major like me, Lon, I think it looks like Disney has already done about, let's call it a little over $4 billion in worldwide box office this year with Star Wars and The Lion King and Toy Story 4.
Waiting,
Still to come.
And Spidey.
And Spider-Man, although Sony, that's a different, I don't know how the economics work. They'll make a little money. Yeah, so Disney's doing okay.
Frozen 2.
Frozen 2? Oh my God, how could I forget Frozen 2?
They're gonna be okay.
Oh my
they're gonna pull it out.
brain melting how that is happening. Okay, Avatar
Frozen
Endgame.
2 is going to be big.
Frozen 2 is going to be big, I think. Although, who knows? Maybe it'll pull up Secret Life of Pets and everyone will have just shut Elsa out in the cold over the last several years. No.
Look at my face. No.
Lon's saying no. That's not going to happen.
No, I don't think so.
We're
You know how
keeping
many little girls still dress like Elsa?
I don't, actually.
Sing those songs? A lot. I don't know numbers, but a lot.
All right, that's good. Lon's got his finger on the pulse of the youth of America, which is good.
I try.
do not.
Listen.
That's good. We're going to keep doing this as long as Avengers Endgame is still in theaters, but let's look at the comparison. The road to the global record is still a game of inches, as Al Pacino would say. About $46 million separating Avengers Endgame and Avatar, as predicted on this show and elsewhere. It is just a tummy crawl to this record. We'll see what happens, but it's we just check in.
Listen.
If I didn't do it, people would ask what was going on.
Yeah, they would.
Well, until Avengers Endgame closes at the box office, we'll keep putting that up every week.
Good luck, Disney. I hope you beat Disney.
They really could use a win.
I hope they finally beat those.
I hope they finally
Disney
beat the movie
bastards.
that they also now own. That would be just a really great cherry on top of the year for them. Not to mention their other $1 billion movie that already came out in the same franchise, and the other $1 billion movie that's probably, or two, that are probably going to come out.
Here's
later
what I'm
this year.
saying. Go to Galaxy's Edge.
They could use it. It's a charitable act, really, at this point. Go get a
Buy
lightsaber.
a lightsaber.
They could use the
I
money.
hear it's a great experience.
Summer movie report. Remember, these are domestic numbers because that makes it easier to check. Because summer dates are so weird around the world, so we have to do it domestically. Aladdin's still the #1 movie of the year. John Wick Chapter 3, the #2 movie of the summer.
Kaboom.
Kaboom.
Love that wick.
It's gonna make more than Pokemon.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I love it. Godzilla King of the Monsters stays there at #4. Rocket Man up to #5. Secret Life of Pets, Dark Phoenix, Ma all enter the top 10 list. Ma in its second weekend. The Intruder, The Hustle dropping down. And we say goodbye to Long Shot, Ugly Dolls, and A Dog's Journey. If you had either of those three movies on your final list, what's wrong
Bold.
with you? You're never gonna win.
It was bold.
It was a bold choice.
Going with Ugly Dolls.
It did not pay off. So, Lon, this week in theaters, Men in Black International. Maybe the third week in a row where we see a new franchise opening that, who knows?
Is there lots of love still for those Men in Blacks? I feel like this is a real case of just what, like, the chart we were looking at before of, like, the quality of 2 and 3, I think, is really going to hurt them.
But here's what, because I put it on my personal top 10 list at the beginning of the summer. Here's why I put it on there. I expected a huge avalanche as the movie got closer of Chris Hemsworth, Tessa Thompson love to just really take over.
Yes.
And Keanu just sucked all that love away from society into himself. And so the Tessa Thompson, Chris Hemsworth resurgence that I was expecting has been eclipsed by a Keanu renaissance.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like even though people love Thor Ragnarok and they like those two, it's really like it's just a test of the ongoing long-term strength of Men in Black. Like the whole campaign is really like remember Men in Black, and I really feel like they're just counting on those nostalgic, positive MIB vibes.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
And Kumail, everybody's making big bets on Kumail this year.
Well, you should make a big bet on Kumail. I think.
Listen, he's a great, funny guy. I just like was the audience love for the movie The Big Sick, or was it for this man, Kumail Nanjiani? We're gonna find out.
The answer is both. They're both delightful.
I mean, he's a very funny man. I'm looking forward to Stuber, like everybody.
Isn't everyone? Shaft is opening this weekend from Warner Brothers and New Line, uniting 3 generations of Shaft.
Let me say right off the bat, a little upset with them.
Okay.
In the John Singleton 90s Shaft, he's the nephew. Samuel Jackson is Richard Roundtree's nephew. And I feel like in this one, they're retconning him to being his son. Well, you can't do that after the fact.
You know, if you go to the Shaft wiki on Fandom, one of the top 5 wikis of all of them that we have.
You're damn right.
This is a hot leak. I don't know. I the trailers look fun.
I'm just talking about Shaft.
Shut your mouth. And as we mentioned before, late night opening in 1,500 theaters. Also opening on not in quite in wide release, but opening on 550 screens. The summer blockbuster that I think we all picked, Jim Jarmusch's The Dead Don't Die zombie movie, the sleeper pick to be a top 10 movie of the summer. the broad appeal that this movie's going to have, I'm sure, is overwhelming.
They've been really trying to be like, it's a hilarious zom-com from Jim Jarmusch. Like, I hope mainstream audiences don't go in to see this. Like, I love Jim Jarmusch, but not a mainstream sensibility.
No, not
like,
a mainstream.
You gotta be picking up what Jim's laying down.
I don't remember how they marketed Ghost Dog, but it'd be like if they marketed Ghost Dog like John Wick.
They kind of did.
Did they?
Yeah,
See, I don't remember.
Because he makes these movies in these very like popular, recognizable genres, but then he totally does his own thing with it.
Right.
And it's tough to try to sell them as like, you love zombies, you love Bill Murray. Like, whoa, this is not like Zombieland, guys. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure it's not like Zombieland.
He's one of the most unique filmmakers working.
And I love him, but
it's a big play for a Jim Jarmusch movie. 550 screens is like 4,000 for a Jim Jarmusch
People
movie.
love zombies.
So.
And I will say, Adam Driver's line delivery of just the word ghouls in the trailer is like, you've sold me on the whole
There
movie.
you go. Well,
like, I think it's zombies, you know. Ghouls.
We'll see how that does. However, some bad news, Lon, which is that there will be no charting next week. I'll be out of the office. I'll be away.
Okay, I don't know how
next
to
week.
do charts.
So and everyone was just like, oh well, why does charting have to not happen when you're not there?
I've never made
if somebody else wants to do it.
I actually took several economics classes, and I still managed to avoid having to make a chart.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, they're not incredibly difficult. They're just time consuming, and I've just really seen really little to no interest of it from anyone else doing the show.
Don't ask me to do math.
Yeah,
man.
exactly. So unless somebody steps in to do it, no charting next week. We'll be back here in 2 weeks to talk about Men in Black International. If it's still around, who knows? I don't know what's going to happen anymore. It's crazy. Men in Black International. We'll also be talking about Toy Story 4 again. Wow, yeah. Really rooting for Disney there. They could really use a big opener there. Child's Play coming out in a couple weeks. We'll also be talking about that when charting is back.
I don't know about this new Chucky, you guys. I don't know. I
love Mark Hamill, but it sounds a lot like the Joker. That was my take from the Child's Play trailer.
I don't know. Looks
and
weird.
Everything else that's opening as we continue in the summer and the road towards Spider-Man and the Lion King and all the other movies that are coming out. Stuber, the most anticipated movie of the summer. Lon, as always, thank you for joining me.
Always a pleasure to be here.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks here on Charting with Dan. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.